GM, and welcome to Moloch Traps, our latest podcast here at From A to Z. I'm Zephi. This is Zombie Shepherd. And we're excited to be bringing you this new show in collaboration with BanklessDAO and its audio-visual team. To be clear, opinions in this series expressed by either of us are our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of BanklessDAO at large. This week, we're going to continue to study and discuss excerpts from the Meditations on Moloch essay written by Scott Alexander. The essay provides examples of multipolar traps, and it delves into various instances from history, biology, and economics to illustrate how competition often results in collective harm. In today's episode, we'll discuss science. Let's start with Alexander's words here. The modern research community knows they aren't producing the best science they could be. There's lots of publication bias, statistics are done in a confusing and misleading way out of sheer inertia, and replications often happen very late or not at all. And sometimes someone will say something like, "I can't believe people are too dumb to fix science. All we would have to do is require early registration of studies to avoid publication bias, turn this new and powerful statistical test technique into the new standards, and accord higher status to scientists who do replication experiments. It would be really simple, and it would vastly increase scientific progress. I must just be smarter than all existing scientists, since I'm able to think of this and they aren't." And yeah, that would work for the science god. He could just make a science decree that everyone has to use the right statistics, and make another science decree that everyone must accord replications higher status. But things that work from a god's eye view don't work from within the system. No individual scientist has an incentive to unilaterally switch to the new statistical technique for her own research, since it would make her research less likely to produce earth-shattering results, and since it would just confuse all of the other scientists. They just have an incentive to want everybody else to do it, at which point they would follow along. And no individual journal has an incentive to unilaterally switch to early registration and publishing negative results, since it would just mean that their results are less interesting than that other journal who only publishes groundbreaking discoveries. From within the system, everyone is following their own incentives and will continue to do so.
Yeah. And it goes a lot of directions. As we talked about in our last episode, a lot of research is done at universities. So the education flywheel leads right into jobs by professors who then get research grants and tenure and have all of the reason in the world to fight for more prestige. So yeah, they have every reason in the world to keep fighting for prestige and to keep gaining higher seats and probably more research grants and able to keep going further and further down their course of whatever it is. And it's just as competitive when you get to that level. And then all the science that's not being done by universities is predominantly being done by corporate R&D.
Think tanks.
Corporate research and development is doing a large percent of the science. And to be fair, that science right there is meant to produce results. It is meant to produce something
Specific results.
Yeah, something we're going to take to market. So like the likelihood of that science being unbiased is significantly lower.
Right. Yeah, there's just too many competing incentives to rush your work, make it as interesting as possible, and get it out there as fast as possible to maximize your profit potential.
Right. And so that is like, whether it's the prestige or the money, same as with education, like either way, you're like caught in this rock and a hard place of like, do I want to do a really good job or do I want to be first and the most interesting? That's the other part too, is like, you actually want, like, why would you go into a field that might be incredibly useful but not incredibly prestigious or not incredibly like it, like popular science, you know? Like unless you can actually like really break something and really do something that no one's ever done, like there's no reason to go down a lot of paths, you know? Um
Chasing funding at that point. You're mostly looking for the grants and you're looking to perpetuate whatever it is that you're interested in working on.
right. Yeah, and I mean, we are at a point in science too where, not to say that we're at the end of science, we have no idea where we are on the spectrum of science, but it seems like we've gotten a lot done in the last 150 years. Like we figured out a whole lot and we've done a lot, especially when it comes to like physics and computation and, machines and machine learning now, and like we've just done a whole lot in science in regards to engineering and other things. It's just like and even medicine. Like it's astounding the things that we've been able to accomplish in basically 150 years. But it gets a lot harder from here. And so, if the only incentive is to produce a new product and to produce a new thing that is for the market, and the only other incentive is to is to get prestige and to get famous from your science, the rest of the science is so much harder that the amount of time and money that goes into cracking those next levels of unlocks are exponentially harder than they were before. Like it's going to take that much more money and that much more research to get anywhere. And to be honest, like if you haven't uncracked like the bottom layer of something, you're just the footnote. You know what I mean? Like you have to really break ground, and there's not a lot of ground to break anymore. Like
And we've spent the last 150 years discovering problems. Instead of spending more time and more money in discovering more problems, let's take care of some of these ones we just found, you know? Or instead of creating products better to make a better product, to sell more of the product, let's produce products better. Let's change, like if we want to go, hey, this is the standard of living that we want. We want to have cars, we want to have mattresses. If these are the things that we want to have, instead of making a better mattress, let's make the mattress better. Let's make it better. Not the making. We need to improve our processes. We need to improve our systems. We need to improve how we're getting to these points we want to get to, not just improving the end point that we get to.
yeah, that's true. And I don't know that that necessarily falls in the realm of science, but I see your point. And I think what does fall in the realm of science is that so the way we're using science is to optimize for capital and for these big achievements, but we're not using science to actually govern the world in a better way and see like it's not profitable to study whether or not the things that we're doing to the planet are harmful for the sake of creating better systems. It's only good to study whether or not the things we're doing to the planet are harmful if you want to sell your solution.
I think that is the inherent failure of this system here. That's the flywheel is we're not sciencing to optimize science, we're sciencing to optimize profit.
Right.
The system's doing the wrong thing.
And not just to optimize science for science sake, but to be using science for the quality of life of the entire planet and the ecosystem we live in. Instead, we use it for self-serving things that are actually, because we're self-interested and self-serving now, will harm us in the long run. There are externalities we're not willing to look at, whether it be like harm to the environment or the harm to our psyches from social media, or you know what I mean, like all these different things that we've just unleashed on ourselves as a people without really studying the consequences, and even when we do know the consequences, not pulling back at all, like not at all changing course knowing the damage, like
Because it's still profitable. We're optimizing for the wrong incentive.
right, exactly. And if science isn't there to make things better and it's just there to like create more prestige and more capital, then there is no way to fix that system. Like, because it's the same with like the education thing. Like, it doesn't matter if you as a teacher want to teach people. If the system doesn't optimize for education, then you are going to have to play that other game or fail.
Yeah, you might call yourself a teacher, but you're in this position that requires you to do other things and not teaching. So you're not
Right.
really a teacher, you're just labeled teacher. Incentive misalignment.
Right. And in a lot of ways, a scientist isn't really a scientist. They're doing research for a specific reason. And that reason isn't necessarily to forward the science. And now, I guess what you can say is that, like, if the research is good, then another scientist can come along and take that research and step on it and not step on it, but step from that and go bigger and better with it. But in a lot of cases, this is what he's talking about with repeatable science is a lot of the times when you go back to like a protein model or, some other statistical research, you spend more time trying to figure out how they did their processes and whether or not it was scrupulous enough to build upon, or whether or not you have to start all the way over because they were cutting corners and the science that you got from them, the statistics you got from them are inaccurate, are biased. And, you know, it becomes this is another way in which it's actually extremely wasteful because if you spent $100,000 or more to do a certain set of experiments and I can't trust that you've done it well enough, then I have to come back and spend $100,000 again just to see that your science was bad science in the first place. But you've already published, you've already gone to the press, you've already got something to market, and there's probably less likely a chance that anyone is even going to bother repeating that science until the class action lawsuit comes out.
Yeah, until there's another profit motive.
And so that's where, like, it becomes a very negative system. Like, all of our systems actually become extremely twisted in this guise of the only incentive is money. The only incentive is money and prestige. And we haven't really started talking about prestige until we got into these multi agent traps, because I think maybe that is, as we were talking about, like, when we were talking about with California and New York in the Race to the Bottom episode, and I was saying that they're outliers. Like, why do people go to these places considering like the Race to the Bottom ethos says you should go away from those places? They're too overregulated, they're too stiff. Like, but there's something about it. There's some prestige. And so we're seeing that here with education and science and Congress and government corruption, is that this power and this prestige that comes with these things is actually something that is greater than capital because it gives you greater access to more power and thus more capital. And even though,
Shoot.
yeah, like prestige, the only thing that sets, like, okay, prestige is still a funnel towards capital. If it wasn't a funnel towards capital, then prestige wouldn't mean anything except ego.
Right.
So that's why prestige is slightly better than capital, because you can make $1 million and still be low class. But in order to get prestige, you have to have a certain level of class that then gets you money, and the money gets you more prestige or power and gets you more capital. And it's this like sustaining effect. And that's why I think these multi agent traps are different, because
Ah, yes.
there's this ego and prestige that goes with it that actually, like, it rubs on everybody around you. So you become a prominent scientist, a prominent educator, a prominent politician, and people just being near you, they take some of that. I get to work with the mayor. I get to work with this MIT, Stanford, Harvard scientist. You know what I mean? It's
I was in the president's administration or whatever. Yeah.
right. Like, how many of how many good podcasters are like there because of their prestige, not necessarily because like their content is original or better in any way. Like it's not even that they have to provide value necessarily. Having prestige gets you better guests, creates a better podcast. So it's really interesting what I've seen where there's a lot of like there's just a lot of content being produced by the same people in this like circle jerk, and I'm like, wait, what is going on here? And I realize it's like, oh, once you start, it's a nepotism thing, it's a circle thing, it's a prestige thing where like, oh, I got on this podcaster with this MIT person, and now I'm going to be able to get this Harvard person, I'll be able to get, my friend works at Harvard and this friend works at Stanford, and like you just get like one guest and you get another guest and it becomes this thing. And I feel like it's maybe the same in crypto, but it it is the same in crypto because if you can get close to this one blockchain or this one founder, then you can get this other founder. If you can get on this one podcast, then you can get this one NFT artist. And so it's the same thing in every field in a sense where this prestige and this ego and this nepotism is this other thing that actually produces like more capital in a sense. Like, but in the end, like everything is optimizing towards capital. And that's really what we're finding. Like when we talk about misaligned incentives, it's like when you look at all of these things, at the root of it is the money. Like in all of the race to the bottom and all of those game theory things, it came down to personal gain, which typically was about money. Like,
And if it's not about money, it's something like prestige, which just leads to more money. The end
right.
game's always money.
And that's kind of what we're seeing in these, yeah, in the multi-agent traps, is it goes from being just about money to being about this other thing. And this other thing is kind of like whale fall, or it's kind of another rung of ladders on the Plinko race to the bottom, where it's like, but it's an infinity loop where it's like, oh, it races to the bottom and then it automatically goes back up to the top. And that's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like it's a chocolate fountain.
Yeah, it's self-sustaining. Just everything's on a loop.
Yeah, and so yeah, I feel like we're at a point with science where um it's very hard to like produce. And I guess it's another like going down, pulling another thread on that and going down another path on that. Like we're at this point also where not just is the science hard, but there's not a lot of prestige left in like continuing to like explore, like map the human brain a little bit further, or you know what I mean? Or like study these rocks a little bit further, or study these stars just a little bit further. Like you have to do something phenomenal. You can't just like discover something new about a star. You've got to discover a whole brand new type of star. Like it can't just be a little bit, it has to be a lot because the prestige is what everybody's going for, not the deeper knowledge and understanding, and not the so like when you're not going deep on anything and you're just trying to find the next big new thing, the next twist to science, I feel like that's what gets us into this dangerous place of being forced to create bigger and badder AIs, being forced to create synthetic biology, being forced to grow synthetic life forms and like bionic life forms and androids. And you have to do it because well, we need new prestigious things. Like it's boring to just like study new rocks or figure out dinosaurs, or like matter of fact, it's so boring to like I don't even want to like figure out dinosaurs. I want to just use my CRISPR to make new mammoths. How about that? And that's exactly what they're doing.
Dart. Yep. That was a good one. Yeah. Forget learning about them. Let's just make new ones. We're way ahead. Yeah.
Right. And like that's where science is in a sense. Like the same with entertainment and everything else is like the science has to be entertaining, the science has to be flashy, because like we're not using it for anything other than either prestige or capital. And either way, you're not going to make any more, you're not going to get any more prestige from boring science, and you're not going to make any new money from boring science. You got to make new products, and that's what's going to get you to the next level. So we need quantum computers, and we need, spoon-sized chihuahuas and whatever else. I don't know, like, you know.
I think I'd rather have cold fusion than spoon-sized chihuahuas, but it's 2023.
That's a
Anything could
great
happen.
point. No, you made a great point though. Like, we would rather cold fusion, cheap energy. We already know how to do cheap energy. Science already figured it out. We're not They're not making any products to give us cheap energy because there's no capital to be made in giving us free energy. There's no way to enslave people in a governmental system or a corporate system with free energy. If you create a system in which people don't have to slave labor for kilowatt hours, then, like, what are they going to do with themselves?
Gosh, we can't let them choose, can we?
And this is why we don't have critical thinking taught in schools. This is why we don't let science run the show, because science would tell us better ideas, hopefully, than, you know, than what governments and corporations have decided for us, because they're optimizing for capital. And the bottom line is, like, a lot of what governments and corporations do would be absolutely useless if science was running the show, because there would be better systems in place in a lot of cases.
The science may be telling us that we're wrecking the planet from every direction. We might have science saying, hey, climate change is happening, and here are its projected effects. We might have science saying, hey, burning all this fossil fuel for our energy maybe isn't the right play. Science is telling us these things, but until there's a different incentive, until there is another attractor, a shift in like what we're looking for, we're just going to keep doing the same stuff. We're still going to keep using the system just to create dollars, even though the system isn't doing anything helpful.
Right, because all we're optimizing for at the end of the day is GDP. Like, and the problem, I thought about this, and, like, it doesn't matter what you individually are optimizing for, because if the entire world and if your entire country and overall the entire world is optimizing for GDP, so are you, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that's the system. That's the game that's being played.
Because if you don't keep up, you will get run over. It's like those video game levels where, like, you got to keep up, because if the wall touches you, the level's over. That's it. Like, if the thing that's it. Like, you can't touch the back of the screen for whatever reason. That's it. Like, and that's essentially kind of what the market is. The market is saying, like, here, I'm coming. I'm going 2 to 3% every year, and I'm coming for you. And if you're not optimizing your life in this way, then, and that is, it doesn't matter what you believe about science or what values you personally hold, because at the end of the day, like, if your diet is too expensive to maintain after a while, you're not going to eat healthy anymore. You're going to stop eating healthy because you can't afford to, because your rent went up so much, because getting to your job, the fuel cost went up so much, the car insurance went up so much, and all of these things are unsustainable. So you're chasing it whether you like it or not. So even at the individual level, all of your values are eventually sacrificed. And that's another reason science doesn't help, because in a lot of ways, like, you see all this stuff and you're like, it's really great to know that, like, hey, the ingredients in white bread are killing me, but I can't afford anything else. It's
Sandwich it is.
a sandwich. It is exactly like, oh, it's either die of the sandwich later or die of starvation today. Like, that's the choices Americans are presented with.
You're optimizing for short-term gain right now, not dying today and sacrificing health over the long term.
And in the end, that's even a losing game, because it's not like it's not, those years don't come off the end of your life. They come off the middle of your life in the form of quality. Like, it's when you reach 40, 45 years old, and all of a sudden you have, like, some organ failing or not working the way it's supposed to, or, like, the food choices lead to you now needing certain medical procedures, or
Which costs 10 times or more as much as the original healthy food that you avoided because you couldn't afford it in the moment.
Right, exactly, because a pound of prevention is cheaper than an ounce of cure. But you're optimizing for right now. That's the Moloch trap. You're always optimizing for right now. So when your body tells you, boy, I need a Coke, you reach for that Coke without thinking twice about it, without thinking twice about the fact that it helps clean off corrosive batteries. You'll put it in your stomach.
It is scoops and scoops and scoops of sugar, straight up just sugar in water.
Yeah.
But you do it anyway.
Right. And so, like, we have science to tell us that all of the things that we're doing are wrong. And we still have a global market that tells us, well, if you want to do things right, it's going to cost you. And it's going to cost you a lot of things. Like your quality of life is going to cost you your quality of stuff. Like if you want to eat better, then you might have to sacrifice getting the new phone. You might have to not have a car. That's another one too. That's a big one. Like the cost of fuel and insurance and the trade-offs for say riding a bike and eating healthy. Like you could buy better food if you weren't paying for the gas and the insurance, and you could ride a bike and you would be healthier for riding the bike and be able to afford the healthier food, but I would have to ride a bike. So I'm going to optimize for convenience and not being sweaty when I get to work. And
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. Those are the trade-offs.
right. But those trade-offs are actually it's the two income trap where you make all these little trade-offs that you look at as normal and optimizing for immediate comfort. And in the long run, it actually would have been better for you to do the hard thing. Like in the and that's really why people don't cooperate. Like we haven't really discussed this in an emotional way or in this sense, but like the reason people don't cooperate is because cooperation involves communication. And communication is hard because people might not understand me, because people might not get me, because people don't like me, because people hate me, because I don't want to be a burden, whatever the reasons may be, communicating with people around you is a lot harder than just making arbitrary decisions and not caring how it affects the other person because it's going to get my outcome. And so you actually might optimize for other people if you know what their needs are and you care about that person, but to even get to that point requires a certain level of caring and intimacy with your coworkers and your fellow students or your neighbors or whoever. And I've talked a lot about individuality in this series, and I think that there's a big divergence in how people think about individualism because I think a lot of people, the most common perception of individualism is worrying about yourself, not worrying about other people, essentially being a stoic and a self interested person and not letting the world affect you and just being like, all around good at optimizing for yourself while not necessarily hurting other people. You're still not being open with other people because that's too risky. And
Everything becomes transactional. Your interactions become transactional and minimalistic, and they're only being decided on one optimized variable instead of, like you said, that long-term interpersonal understanding, the social connection.
right. Yeah, and that's really what it is it's kind of what I was saying before about doctors and other people is like it is transactional, so it's hard to think that like my waitress or my doctor or my therapist cares for me in any way because like this is just a transaction and you're going to forget me after this most likely. Like, you know what I mean? Like communication takes a much deeper connection and cooperation involves communication, and if you can prevent this is the other part, if you can prevent any kind of attachments and caring about people, then it's easier to optimize for self-interest because you can ignore everyone else. It's easier to ignore everyone else if you don't know who they are and you don't form connections with them. And
Put
and
them into the externality category. It's easier that way.
well, and it's also why, yeah, like, hey, look, you're just a coworker. You're not a friend. You know what I mean? Like, and jobs make it that way because another thing is that people will often if you make friends at a job, they will separate you. It's not like people, I mean, depending on the type of job it is, but like often, people don't want you working with your friends because enjoying work isn't part of the thing. And often it doesn't even make sense because it's not necessarily like working with people you like makes you work any worse. They just don't want you having fun at work. Like kind of like people don't want you sitting at work as if like sitting necessarily slows you down or makes your job harder. Like you know what I mean? Like cashiers aren't allowed to sit. Like why do they need to stand? They're literally
They don't.
they don't, but that's the system that's the system we're in where we're like, "Oh, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean." It's like, "No, I'm so good at my job that I have time to lean. Fuck off."
Right. Sorry for excelling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean there's no incentive to do better work. And that includes science and education. There's no incentive to do a good job in a system in which the only incentive is capital and or prestige. And in most cases, there is no chance to get prestige, as I've said in past episodes about how do you get these seats when the seats have been taken for 30, 40 years. There's no prestige to go for at some point. And the people who've held these seats and held these positions of power have ensured that no money trickles down anymore. And so there's no incentive to even do a good job because not only will I never achieve a higher rate, a higher status, but you're not even paying me for the status I'm in now. I'm not even achieving a livable wage. So, yeah, I mean, and to me, like all of this begins with, you know, on the individual level, I guess it begins with education and science because, like, your ability to think and understand the world that we live in is 100% based on your understanding of how this world works. And I feel like education is the social part of it, and science is the reality of it. And when both of these things aren't optimizing for the truth, then you as an individual are going to have a hard time finding truth in this world.
Well put. Yeah. These are the institutions we look to provide truth. This is where we supposedly are bettering ourselves, are bettering our understanding of ourselves, the planet, the universe, everything. And if those channels are full of garbage, where do you go? This is the Steve Bannon approach, the flood the zone with shit. If you just flood it, people won't be able to pull out the real information, and it reduces their sovereignty, reduces their capability, reduces their power. They're just
Yeah,
overwhelmed with garbage.
that's actually a good take on it because in a lot of ways you could think like maybe that is the point of social media. Maybe that is actually what's been
It
done is
100% is.
yeah, like by flooding us with information and disinformation, you don't know what to believe. You don't know what's true. You do get caught up in your own biases.
And you do receive the ads the whole time.
Right. And so like at the end of it, like you don't know how to handle any of these world problems. So I may as well just like order Uber Eats and watch the fireworks. You know what I mean?
Turn on TV, yeah.
Like what's the point of trying if no one else is going to? Like the scientists in the example, like, hey, I'll do it when everybody else does. You
Well,
know?
it goes back to the fish filter thing too. This is yeah, that pact sounds like a great idea. Why don't you go ahead and start? And once you get it all set up, I'll jump in. But until then, I'm going to keep optimizing for profit.
Right. And yeah, unfortunately, like science is not above this thing because it is a branch of the market and it is a branch of education. And education is a branch of the market. And
It's a Leviathan.
yeah, I mean, and I guess that's what it comes down to is it's hard to say like Moloch traps, all of these things are Moloch. And in the end, like what is Moloch other than our own self-interest embodied, it really is not a thing in the
Yeah,
sense that, like, you can't just blame capitalism, even though you can kind of bring it all back to money and those like that is our only incentive. So when you say that these are all games of misaligned incentive, if all of the incentives come down to capital, it's easy to blame capitalism and say, well,
right.
the market drives everything. The only, you know, if you want to embody Moloch and you want to say, where is Moloch? Well, there's only one invisible hand, and we call it the market.
Right. And the market moves because of our actions. It doesn't move by itself. The
Right.
market is a reflection of our actions.
And the only way that we could actually realign any system is by creating a system in which the incentive, which in this case is only capital, is greater. So, how do you
Right.
create a greater capital incentive that is also aligned with quality of life and human survival?
There has to be a value. There has to be a value put on human life and human survival. If those things can't be quantified, traded, measured, then they won't be counted. They won't even be considered.
That is the problem with the market, is that exactly what you said. Like, we have to quantify and add a value to everything. And I think the mistake of that is that you can't quantify and add a value to everything, and doing it actually devalues it in a sense, because, like, you don't want love or friendships. You don't like, I don't even know if you could quantify what these things are worth. But if
I
you
don't think you could.
could, would you want to know?
No, no. And this, quick aside, this is a big portion of my hesitancy or avoidance of these like friend tech, post tech things. I don't want to know what my social value is to other people and watch it go down randomly and then have the feedback loop of I feel bad, so I'm worth less, so then I'm worth less because I feel bad. Nobody needs that. That's an experiment I don't want to participate in.
Right. And so I think that's why, like, the market does take the blame for Moloch. But without capitalism, Moloch would still be there. As we've discussed with other examples, like, there's still jealousy. There's still, the fight for a better partner or the better house. Because even in a system where, like, that's actually kind of the argument for capitalism, is like, well, how do you decide who gets the best house without capitalism? Like, how do you divvy up the houses, or does everybody get a 10 by 10 cube? Do we just, you know what I mean? Like, what does the perfect world look like? And, the problem is that every version of a utopia is someone else's dystopia.
It's all about perspective. Yep, it's all about perspective.
So I feel like that is one of those ways in which science could answer some of these questions, but we're not using it for that purpose. Science could probably start to quantify what makes us happy, what environments are better for us as human beings, what food and diet is better, what type of media consumption and to what degree. Like, we actually could optimize for a better world, but how do you do that without authoritarianism? How do you actually get people to make positive decisions? And actually, this is really interesting, because the funny part is, when we say, like, the current system we're in now, like, people aren't eating McDonald's because it's the best option. They're eating McDonald's because they've been convinced it's the best option. It's
Ooh.
And so we're already in an authoritarian system. You just think that your incentives are aligned towards the self, but they're not. Your incentives are aligned towards the algorithm. You are being manipulated. You're already in a dystopia. So it's funny that every version of a utopia where science could take the lead or some other system could take the lead, whether, socialism or whatever it is, in every version of that, people say, you would be taking away my right to choose. You would be taking away my free will, these other things. It's like under the current system, your right to choose and your free will are already gone. You've
It's
been
all just an
tricked.
illusion. Yeah.
Yeah, we are in the United States of choice. Like you can choose Pepsi or Coke. You can't choose freedom.
Lead free water.
Yeah, I
Can't choose
mean,
that.
like it really comes down to you have your choice of market options. You don't have your choice of freedoms. Like freedom is just a supermarket aisle with a lot of choices. And actually even that is an illusion because you
You get to
know,
choose from what's in that aisle that we put there.
yeah, but when you go back to the investors on that aisle, there's basically 3 investors. So,
Yeah.
like, the entire supermarket is brought to you by BlackRock, thanks.
Thanks. Ah,
Yeah, so, like, your choices are an illusion of choice. All of your so we're already in a dystopia. We're already in an authoritarian dystopia that makes us think that these unhealthy choices are our own. And that this is the best option and that you would actually be unhealthy or unhappy under a world where they won't allow you to buy a gallon of sugar to drink right now. You know what I mean? Like like when
great
people were
example.
so mad when they were like trying to like shut down the sodas or whatever. It's like this is my freedom you're taking. It's like, dude, you don't need to drink a bucket of Mountain Dew in 1
Yeah.
hour. Like you don't. I'm sorry that we're impinging on your freedoms to drink a bucket of Mountain Dew, but my dude, you'll be in a better place if you don't do it.
That's right. You don't need the amount of fire retardant that's in that Mountain Dew in your body today.
But it's
Skip it.
actually the fact that it's not your choice. You've been told for 25, 35 years that you need this thing, and now you're addicted to this thing, and you think that someone trying to improve your life is hurting you, because you've been that brainwashed into the system of unhealthy foods, unhealthy medication, so that you can be forced into medications. And even those medications, like the FDA is barely a reputable organization, if at all. You know what I mean? Like,
And if you've got side effects, we've got more medications for those.
exactly. And it's funny how the side effects of everything are the same. Like, hey, you know what? It may cause depression, diarrhea, headaches, muscle spasms, heart failure, death. What?
Talk
Bro,
to your doctor, though.
I just had social anxiety. I don't want diarrhea and death as possible symptoms.
Yeah, I'll just take a deep breath and drink more water.
Nothing helps my social anxiety more than diarrhea.
Precisely.
Oh my God. So, Um, and somehow the flywheel of science persists because the papers got to get written. The journals, which we didn't even really dive into, but the journals need new headlines, you know.
That's the prestige bit. I guess we touched on it.
Well, that's the prestige I feel is more for the scientists themselves, but I guess it counts for the journals in a sense. But like the journals are just trying to keep selling issues or whatever it is. Like that's another whole thing is like most science is public, but journals put it behind paywalls. You know what I mean? Like, and that's another racket right there where like individuals can actually get access to a lot of the science. It's actually supposed to be public information, especially if it is government paid for public science. But the journals come along and put up a paywall and say you got to get it through us. And also like that's how the scientists get their recognition. So like I want to be in popular science journal. And it's a self-perpetuating system, but it's not doing anything for us,
There you go.
and it's not doing anything for even better science. Because if you have good science or good math that comes along and disproves a lot of popular opinions, and especially if it causes any fluctuations in the market that we wouldn't like, we are not going to fund that science. Don't want to hear about it. It's interesting too how a lot of people say science has replaced religion, that people depend on science the way they used to depend on religion. And I feel like maybe on an individual level that may be true. Like people look to science to answer all their even though it's like they're usually typically pulling confirmation biases, like, no, I can totally eat this thing. Science says it's fine. And it's like, no, I don't think you can just drink coconut oil. Like that's not what they meant when they said that, like you're still drinking saturated fats. Like you know what I mean? Like you still have to use coconut oil in moderation. It doesn't mean just like, you know, use twice as much as you were with butter. Like that's not how that works. But I think it's funny because like even if science has in some way become the new religion, like we're not using it in a way that you think it we would be using religion. Like I guess we're not using religion in that way either, but like it's I don't know, it's just not an embedding process. It's very much like, yeah, we're not actually optimizing for better decisions. We don't use scientific knowledge to optimize for better decisions as a species.
We use it to reinforce our opinions.
As an individual, yeah. And the science is on my side, at least this journal is.
This particular science, yes, exactly.
Until the next 5 years when they tell me that eggs are not good for me again.
And we'll ignore those because I have this one that says they're good.
I love my eggs. I'm gonna and my coconut oil or whatever. Yep. Well, we'll see from a God's eye view if somebody can fix this broken system. But thanks for watching today's episode of Moloch Traps Science. And we hope you enjoy this series. As always, none of what we said is legal or financial advice, and we encourage listeners to do their own scientific research in these areas before making any related decisions. If you find our content informational, educational, entertaining, and would like to support us, please collect our episodes on tape.xyz. 18% of proceeds go back to BanklessDAO. 2% supports Tape for hosting our videos, and the rest helps to make From A to Z productions possible. To stay on top of our weekly series, subscribe to us on the BanklessDAO YouTube, and don't forget to like and comment while you're there. We will see you next time, friends. Peace.